College. Just being on this college campus reminds me of the extremes I used to live in. It was the best of times, and it was definitely the worst of times. And I found it really difficult to manage my stress. But I didn't really think about stress management when I was in college. I was mostly sleep deprived and staying up all night. So how many of you didn't sleep last night? How many of you don't even know what sleep is? Okay, so we're going to get to that. So basically, there was this expression my mother would use and my father would say, is that youth is wasted on the young. But I realize now that years later, I didn't really have to be the major my parents told me I had to be. Like, what were they going to really do? Come and kill me? Like, why did I feel I had to live up to all these huge expectations? And these extremes literally were killing me. So on the one hand, I had the best of times, and I felt incredible freedom. I was like, yeah, I will eat as much Cap'n Crunch as I want to. Who's going to take my spoon away? I got this. And later, when the freshman 15 came, I thought, how did this happen? But I wasn't a student athlete anymore. I wasn't the valedictorian of my high school, and I wasn't the precocious kid in kindergarten who told other children, do you know how to spell pneumonia? And when they began with N-E-W, I'd say, no, it's P-N-E-U. Everyone who's 5 knows that. You could see I had social skills to work on and some problems there. And I had other problems with just integrating when you were so famous in your high school and nobody knew you in your college. And so when I came to college, I recognized a couple of things, which is I would constantly live in this paradox. Incredible freedom, but incredible stress. Incredible safety on the one hand, and incredible danger of things that people weren't openly talking about. So back then they called it date rape, but college is the first place that I experienced sexual assault. And both in undergraduate and graduate school, it was the first place in which I entered into an emotionally abusive relationship that took 12 years to extricate myself from. Had you told me when I first went to college that I was the adult child of an alcoholic, that I was severely traumatized as a child by some levels of neglect, if you told me that my parents were constantly critiquing me in ways that made me feel insecure, I would defend them. I would not go to therapy. Anything about mental health was considered a stigma. You certainly didn't talk about going to therapy. And so when I finally snuck my way into therapy in graduate school, I began to whisper about things in my life, and the therapist was nodding and saying, you've been under severe stress and trauma. And I thought, no way. And I would pull out the GPA and all the accomplishments and the incredible drive to succeed. And I would prove to these people that no matter what had happened, and obviously I did have nice parents and good parents, but I also had people who were traumatized and didn't get help. So now you would imagine that later in my life I became a broadcaster and I went into marketing because why? My parents told me that was my career. But every time I talked to somebody about marketing, I would talk to them about stress. And my clients would be like, are you going to do something around our website? And I'm like, let's just talk about the stress we have here in the office. And what I recognized from all that is I had an incredible passion to help people mitigate the effects of stress in their lives and severe trauma. I was in great denial that I was one of those people for many years. In fact, it wasn't until I got a text message a few years ago from another woman who was one of my best friends. Her name was Michelle Berry. So we had a lot of fun. She lived in Binghamton, and people confuse us all the time. And she had freckles. I kind of have freckles, but she was white. And there would be people who would say, and she would show up, and we would say we were twins, and we were sisters separated at birth. And we loved that. And we'd really say we were sisters, and people are like, adopted? I'm like, no, blood, completely blood. And what Michelle taught me, though, was in a text message that came a few years ago. And I was in Africa, and I just got off the plane, and her text message said, do not come home, but do let people know that people are going to think that you have a brain tumor, because I do, and it's inoperable. Have a really great time in Africa. We'll talk about this when I get back. And so Michelle, in her death, because she did die, taught me about my own mortality, because people thought I was dying, right, because we had the same name. And she taught me this quote from Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets. She said, what is it that you wish to do or plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And I thought, I better start answering that question right now, today. Because I had been sleepwalking through life, and I don't really think I was doing anything but going through the motions. And Mary Oliver also asked another question, which is when she says, listen, are you breathing just a little and calling it a life? And how many of us are breathing and calling that living? How many of us are burning the candle at both ends, extremely stressed out and exhausted? I know that we can all wake up to our wonderful life, but we have to actually know that we're asleep. And I've been asleep for years until Michelle's death taught me that. You never know. She was 56 years old. Now, I know that can be old by some standards. I remember when I was in college and I was about 18 years old, I thought people who were 40 were probably almost over for this world. But when you get 40, it's very young, right? So one of the things that I recognized, right, was that the first way to wake up and realize that we were all in this together was to realize we had to stop doing some of the things that we had been doing. And it's hard to tell college students to go to sleep. You're like, that's when I do all my work. I stay up all the time. But I bet that years later, you're going to want to know that some of the sleep deprivation is going to have health effects. And I don't like to educate through fear as much as just some facts and some personal anecdotes thrown in. So basically, one of the things I want to ask you right now is do you think the cost of unmitigated stress and sleep depression is in healthcare? So how much do we spend as Americans each year just on job stress alone? Give me any number. Yes, actually, $360 billion. Expressed in terms of attrition, presenteeism. You know, that's when you show up, the lights are on, but you're not home. That's what you do in your classes a lot. You're like, I'm just going to go to class, but I'm really not paying attention, right? And there's also a number of other factors, like there's increasing violence at work because of sleep deprivation and unresolved conflicts. So we're seeing all of these things bear out in the workplace in terms of job stress and distractedness. So this is what it costs just to deal with those matters, job stress and sleep deprivation. Can you imagine what it also costs about bad relationships, difficult people who are everywhere, by the way, just everywhere? Don't you realize a difficult person will pop up every day to try to steal your joy? Every day, and there's always the annoying emotional vampire, but you feel very proud that you can solve their problems. Anybody playing therapist? I've been playing therapist for years. I'm not a therapist. I'm like, please tell me about your problems with trauma and your depression. It's not like I have any, right? So if you want to get more sleep, you probably don't want to do this. Isn't this tempting? To think about maybe smashing the alarm clock with a hammer? Now, it's a tempting idea to think you might smash the alarm clock, but is the alarm clock the problem? And by the way, this is a very old picture, I know. No one here has an alarm clock. So your iPhone that you sleep with all the time and you put on your head, or your smartphone, or whatever little chimes you listen to. So if you can't smash the clocks, what do you need to do to deal with the fact that you're not getting enough sleep and enough rest? What can you do? Because Americans are in serious crisis right now because of sleep deprivation. And some people laugh about it, like, we never sleep, that's okay. We drive cars and everything, take care of children, we're not sleeping. Often we think of wellness on this wheel, or maybe we don't. We might think of wellness in terms of, don't you have people say, how are you feeling? And it's either good or bad. So wellness is based on physicality. But since I became obsessed with wellness, I recognize that there's a wheel. And these 7 characteristics on the wheel are what determine how we're doing for optimal health and wellness. Do we have to be perfect on every level of the wheel? Absolutely not. But we have to make sure some other elements of this wheel are working. How are our finances? How's our spirituality? How's our social life? How's our career going? How are we doing with our mental health? How are we feeling about our families? Not just how are we feeling about a workout. And a workout can really save your life, it's true. And I found since I've been increasing my workouts, I'm just obnoxiously happy. I'm like, hey, you're running? Has anybody jogged? Has anybody sprinted? I've been hiking. I feel so great. I'm kind of drugged because you get a high from working out. So what you don't get a high from is competition. But it's kind of a paradox to tell college students and other people in high-stress jobs or leaders not to compete. The American way is always about competition. And only in the United States could it be bad that you brought home the bronze. Hello, the bronze medal in the Olympics. But they're like, did you win what? The gold. So going for the gold also means that you will be sleep deprived and you're going to burn out. This is what it really looks like when we walk into a room. These are all the things over our heads, the problems of the day. One big problem of the day, if not sleeping well, is that if you don't sleep well, you're not alone. 70 to 90 million Americans either have sleep apnea or insomnia. So you wake up, but you're not fully awake. You walk through life as if drugged. You're not really with us. The lights are on. Nobody's really home. You're listening to murmuring. You ever have somebody talk to you and just nod your head continuously? You think, I hope they have no idea. I hope they don't figure out that I'm not listening at all. And inside your mind are all the problems of the day replaying themselves. And you realize when you go to bed at night, you take those problems with you. And you ever toss and turn? Do you ever replay in your sleep what you would have said to that person if you could have said it? And you're like killing them in your sleep, and you're thinking of all ways that they're going to get revenge on them. And then you watch an episode of Scandal, and you got to follow that. How many people see themselves in this picture? That's a migraine headache. Until I got one, I used to think they weren't so bad. I was kind of like, is the migraine really that bad where we can make no sound? And then I got my first migraine, and I literally said to my family, can somebody just kill me? This is so bad. But sleeping at your desk is really common. How many people have done this? You ever fall asleep working and your head falls on the keyboard of your computer? I once had a bruise right here. How do you explain that? So I said it was like Ash Wednesday, and Catholic. They were like, yeah, I don't think it's the time of year. So I'm embarrassed, right, that I really would fall asleep on my books and papers, and I've damaged myself. I've fallen out of chairs. If you fall asleep on your work, what is it telling you? That you should, did somebody say that you're cray? That you should go to bed, and you should sleep. Bed, by the way, isn't sitting up at the computer. This makes us a sick nation because we don't get enough sleep. So I'm tying sleep insufficiency in my research to one of the #1 public health problems. And so since I've dedicated my career to investigating the connection between unmitigated stress and trauma on our lives, and I look at the difference in people. Years ago, I did a focus group in college with athletes, and those who would either hardwire themselves to resiliency based on unmitigated stress, and others who would spiral into depression. And more people cared about the example of the winner than they did. They called the person in depression some sort of loser. But I was interested in what happens when you don't feel like you can get well. And I look at this group here, and I look at this group over here in terms of pushing and driving yourself. And I work with a lot of athletes or high-stress people and executives. And if I tell you, get rid of your perfectionism, lose your edge, you're not going to listen to me. So I say, can we decrease your edginess so you can maintain your edge? Here are some risks from sleep deprivation, believe it or not. All these things. Carbohydrate cravings late at night are not a figment of your imagination. They're because your brain is exhausted, so it wants to be fed a lot of crappy things. So that's why we're worried about obesity, because late night snacking is a huge problem. If we are what we eat, then I would have turned into, long ago, some wings from college and Rice Krispie treats and probably half a package of ramen noodles. So how can we wake up as Americans, as people, as citizens on the planet? One thing that we can do is recognize that we need to try to go to bed the same time every night and get up the same time every day. And if we don't do that for one night, that's okay, try the next night. Try not to exercise right before bed. And try not to use drugs to medicate yourself into wakefulness. So people are taking drugs to stay awake, like caffeine, and taking sleeping pills to go to bed at night because they can't wake up to their lives. But I would challenge you that the inability to listen to our hearts is some reason why we're not living as well as we'd like to live. So I would think from a Native American perspective, instead of trying to cure a disease, what if we looked at healing the heart and the whole person's connection with spirit and plants and animals? What if we began to look at what the old ancient texts tell us? What would we learn? The Institute of Heart Math explains that there is a clear connection between the head and the heart. And we've been trying to divorce ourselves of that all the time. I'm just making the decision with my head, not my heart. No, you probably shouldn't do that, because the heart getting ignored is causing us heart disease, and 600,000 Americans are dying each year from heart disease. A lot of that is due to sleep deprivation and not listening to your true life's calling. So I came up with these ways to listen to your heart. Can you do all 7 of these things in one night? No. But the first step is listening and taking really good care of yourself. You are your best friend. You're the person who has to love you more than anybody else. I know the mainstream song lyrics tell you somebody else is going to love you so good, it's going to be great, you're going to live forever, and you're just going to float in the sea of happiness. But they're going to be irritating, you're going to be troublesome, you're going to bring in your childhood unresolved baggage, you're going to resist therapy, and you're going to have a very long relationship filled with drama. So how can you heal your heart? Well, what's really important is to think about what the ancients thought. So the ancient Greeks and Chinese thought about the heart and thought that the spirit resided in the heart. And for the African Egyptians, they felt that the heart was simply a book, storing all of life's memories and all of life's experiences and ideas. So when you listen to the heart, it tells you go to sleep. It tells you that's not the person for me. It tells you that that is a really boring professor, but I better quote everything they say because I've learned the game in college, and that's how I get the A. The professor must be very fascinating. You'll learn that by graduate school. You're still resisting here in undergrad, but in grad school you learn the professor's book when it's brought in, it has to be your best friend. And you have to read it all the time like the Bible. If we're going to really heal our heart, then we're going to listen deeply to that wild calling inside ourselves. It isn't to run yourself on the treadmill of life in the rat race and never feel like you're enjoying anything. It's actually to take that risk and say, this is what I actually want to do. And there's a great thinker, his name is Vishen Lakhiani from Mind Valley, and he talks about, we're always focusing on our means goals as a country, but what if we looked at our end goals? What if we thought about what we wanted to contribute from the heart level in terms of the ways we want to grow, the ways we want to contribute in life, and what we want to experience? And we've seen from today, people have done amazing things that are just completely mind-boggling. The ways that we can push our bodies for a goal or recover from a stroke. We've seen ways that we can do things that cause us pain, that get us to an end goal that makes us better, wholer, living with our whole hearts. We've listened to people talk about great struggle and success. But the theme today that's been so interesting is that it's about love. It's about loving the self and dealing with the very most basic things that we can do, is just to show gratitude for ourselves and for others. So if we're going to heal our sick nation around stress and unmitigated trauma, one, we have to ask for help. The next thing is we have to listen to the heart, because it's speaking a really powerful message. And it also has a wildness to it that we shouldn't try to tame. There's a poem that I was afraid I wasn't going to commit to memory, and I don't want to mess it up, by Mary. Mary Oliver writes, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles in the rain are moving across the landscape, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clear blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing itself in the family of things. Don't wait another day to live from your heart. Don't wait another day to answer the call of the wild geese, because you are beautiful and amazing. Don't live with debilitating stress or stigmatize mental health. Enjoy your life right now. Don't say, I'm suffering now so I can be famous later. Don't run your life by thinking about how much money you'll make. Think about how much you'll contribute and how much you'll learn to love yourself. Because in the end, we only have this one wild and precious life. And so even though I was in denial that I would die, when this woman with my name died, I realized that one day I'm going to die. I don't want to die not having lived fully or been awake.